The ash settles like gray snow on the scorched concrete. The temperature in the subbasement is still hovering at 114 degrees. You stand in the ventilation shaft, watching the final wisps of white smoke clear the exhaust grate. There is nothing left in room 4B. The titanium alloy of the server racks has pooled into hardened metallic puddles on the floor. The air smells of ozone, melted copper, and the faint, bitter metallic tang of vaporized blood. You check your watch, 3 hours and 42 minutes. That is the exact lifespan of a human identity when subjected to absolute thermal and chemical erasure. You turn around and begin the 70-step climb to the street. 2 minutes before the thermal spike, you were kneeling on the linoleum. You held a 3-inch magnesium ribbon between your thumb and forefinger. Your gloves were coated in a thin layer of fire-retardant gel. You inserted the ribbon into a compacted block of iron oxide and aluminum powder. A standard thermite charge burns at 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. You had augmented this mixture with a proprietary barium nitrate oxidizer. It does not just burn, it devours. You struck the igniter. The flare of blinding white light forced your pupils to contract instantly. You did not look away. You watched the leading edge of the reaction eat through the steel casing of the primary safe before you turned and walked toward the heavy steel door. You sealed it behind you. You listened to the low, terrifying roar of absolute destruction. 14 minutes before the ignition, you were operating a handheld cordless drill with a specialized cobalt steel bit. The bit was exactly 5/32 of an inch in diameter. You had 24 physical hard drives stacked on the folding table. The extraction team had already pulled the network cables. The servers were dead, but the platters inside held 12 terabytes of encrypted intercepts. Software wiping takes hours. You do not have hours. You placed the tip of the drill bit over the spindle axis of the first drive. You pulled the trigger. The high-pitched scream of metal grinding against metal filled the damp room. You drove the bit straight through the aluminum casing, shattering the glass and ceramic platters inside. A cloud of fine toxic dust puffed into the air. You inhaled the smell of pulverized silicon. You repeated this process 23 more times. Your forearm burned from the vibration. It took you exactly 4 minutes and 20 seconds. You swept the ruined metal husks into a canvas bag. You poured a half-gallon of corrosive acid over the pile. The hissing sound masked the heavy footsteps of the extraction team moving down the hall. 35 minutes before the drill touched metal, the room was a biological hazard. You wore a full-face respirator and a sealed Tyvek suit. The pressurized canister on your back held 3 gallons of a highly concentrated 12% hydrogen peroxide solution. You began in the far left corner. You held the brass nozzle 18 inches from the drywall. You squeezed the trigger and walked backward in a meticulous, overlapping grid pattern. The spray hit the wall, the floor, the ceiling tiles. You coated every surface. The solution immediately began attacking organic material, hair follicles, skin flakes, microscopic droplets of sweat, residual breath vapor condensed on the cold glass of the single window. All of it dissolved into harmless, untraceable oxygen and water. You watched the chemical foam bubble slightly, where the asset had rested his head against the baseboard. You stood there for exactly 60 seconds, letting the compound work, listening to the rhythmic, mechanical breathing of your own respirator. 50 minutes before the chemical wash, the asset was still conscious. He was a mid-level logistics coordinator for a rival syndicate. He had been in this safe house for 9 days. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a stained white t-shirt. He smelled of stale coffee and panic. You stepped into the room. He did not hear you open the reinforced door. He was pacing. You walked up behind him. Your right arm hooked under his chin. Your left hand secured the grip behind his neck. He thrashed. His heel struck your left shin. You felt the sharp, dull pain radiate up to your kneecap. You did not let go. You applied exactly 14 pounds of pressure to the carotid arteries on both sides of his neck. His hands clawed at your forearms. 10 seconds, his movements became sluggish. 15 seconds, his knees buckled. 18 seconds. The dead weight of his 176-pound frame pulled heavily against your muscles. You lowered him to the floor. You drew a pre-filled syringe from your chest rig, 2 milligrams of a synthetic opioid derivative. You found the vein in his right arm. You pushed the plunger. His breathing slowed to 6 shallow respirations per minute. You signaled the transport crew. They arrived in 30 seconds. They bagged him. They carried him out. You did not look at his face again. 2 hours before the physical takedown, you were sitting in the driver's seat of a commercial plumbing van parked 3 blocks away. The engine was off, the cabin was cold, the dashboard clock read 2:14 in the morning. You had a pair of binoculars resting in your lap, but you were not looking through them. You were staring at the red brick facade of the building. You were running the architectural blueprints through your mind. You mentally mapped the structural load-bearing walls, the ventilation shafts, the plumbing stacks. You calculated the optimal placement for the thermal charges to ensure the fire would burn hot enough to consume the evidence, but not hot enough to compromise the building's foundation and trigger a multi-agency structural collapse investigation. You adjusted the tight leather of your gloves. Your heart rate was a steady 62 beats per minute. This was the math of erasure. You have done this math 412 times over the last 10 years. Every room in the world is just a volume of air, a collection of surfaces, and a calculation of the heat and chemicals required to make it empty. 4 hours before you parked the van, you were standing in your own sterile garage. The fluorescent lights hummed with a low electrical buzz. You stood at a stainless steel workbench. You were weighing out the barium nitrate powder on a digital scale. The red lead display flickered, 20.4 grams. You used a plastic scraper to remove a fraction of a gram until the display read exactly 20.0. Precision is the line between a clean job and a forensic nightmare. Your movements were deeply ingrained muscle memory. You packed the powder into the custom-machined steel cylinders. You threaded the ignition caps. You wiped down the exterior of each cylinder with isopropyl alcohol to remove your own fingerprints, even though the cylinders would be vaporized. You leave nothing to chance. You place the charges into the molded foam inserts of your hard case. The satisfying friction of the heavy case snapping shut echoed in the empty garage. 5 hours before the garage, you were sitting in a windowless room with a single air conditioning unit rattling in the wall. You had a specialized laptop open on the card table. The screen glowed green in the dark. You were running an automated script to hijack the traffic cameras within a 4-block radius of the target. You watched the lines of code cascade down the monitor. You bypassed the municipal firewall in 47 seconds. You isolated the IP addresses of the 7 cameras that pointed toward the safe house. You did not blind them. Blinding triggers an immediate maintenance alert. Instead, you captured a 10-minute loop of empty street footage and fed it back into the live stream buffer. The security dispatchers sitting downtown would see nothing but a quiet, undisturbed block for the next 8 hours. You listened to the rhythmic clicking of your keyboard. The plastic keys were worn smooth. You initiated a localized cellular jammer protocol, delaying the signal broadcast by 0.8 seconds. Just enough lag to disrupt encrypted voice over IP communications inside the target structure. You closed the laptop. The screen went black. The only sound left was the mechanical rattle of the air conditioner. 7 hours before the screen went black, your burner phone vibrated against your ribs. You were in a crowded grocery store. You were holding a plastic bottle of orange juice. The ambient noise of shopping carts and bad pop music faded. You reached into your jacket pocket. The screen displayed a single elevendigit alphanumeric code. The first 2 letters indicated the city. The next 3 numbers indicated the threat level. The final 6 characters were the precise geographic coordinates of the target. You memorized the sequence in 3 seconds. You crushed the phone in your hand, feeling the cheap plastic casing splinter against the battery housing. You dropped the pieces into a nearby trash can filled with discarded coffee cups. You placed the orange juice back on the refrigerated shelf. You walked out the sliding glass doors into the fading afternoon light. 10 years before the phone vibrated, you believed that things mattered. You believed that objects held memories, that rooms retained the ghosts of the people who lived in them. You believed that a home was more than just drywall and copper wire. Now you stand in the alleyway watching the smoke clear. You feel the heat radiating through the soles of your boots. You look at your hands. They are steady. They are always steady. You understand the fundamental truth of the universe. Matter cannot be destroyed, only transformed. You do not kill. You do not murder. You simply accelerate entropy. You take the complicated, messy, chaotic evidence of human existence and you return it to carbon, water, and heat. You turn up your collar against the chill wind blowing off the river. You walk toward the subway station. The city wakes up around you. completely unaware of the void you just carved into its foundation. You step onto the crowded train. You look at the hundreds of faces staring at their phones. You calculate the volume of the subway car. You estimate the ventilation flow rate. You close your eyes. You wait for the next vibration.